Welcome to the High Performance Hockey Podcast. Today we're joined by performance coach and business owner, Maria Mountain. Maria has spent decades in the field of strength and conditioning. She founded Revolution Sport Conditioning in 2005, received her master's degree in science and kinesiology under the mentorship of Dr. Peter Fowler, and currently runs an online business training hockey goaltenders from all over the world. She puts out tons of information on social media and is a friend and colleague. Today, we want to speak about the position of the goaltender, how the position has evolved, the preparation process for a goaltender, demands or different demands placed on goaltenders rather than forwards and D, and advice for young goaltenders. We also talk about her business, goalietrainingpro.com. It's a fantastic episode. Maria is a very, very intelligent person, and we're looking forward to chatting with her. Welcome to the podcast, Maria. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure to chat with you, Anthony.
It's long overdue. We've met many years ago at various conferences. I've always learned from you, number one. I think impressive the most about your hunger for continuing education and always wanting to get better. The purpose of our conversation regarding goaltending training. You've done this and you've worked with goaltenders for eons. What drew you to this? Why goaltenders?
That's what everyone asks. Everyone kind of is like, what? Goaltenders? So I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. Growing up as a kid in London, Ontario, which is near and dear to your heart as well.
That's right.
Girls didn't play it. Like there wasn't girls hockey at all. And even boys hockey wasn't the way it is now. So there was a lot of road hockey and outdoor rink hockey being played. And I was always a goalie. I was always Ken Dryden, and my Greek grandmother, my yaya, it broke her heart, because she wanted me to be in like a little dress or whatever. And finally she just succumbed. It was like, fine, I'm going to buy you that wool Habs jersey, the old scratchy kind, but so that's growing up. I always just was a goalie. So then when I started Revolution Sport Conditioning, and even before that, when I was at Fowler Kennedy Sport Medicine Clinic, I always enjoyed training hockey players, and it's just a great group of athletes to work with. But I always enjoyed the goalie part of it, and learning. Jeff Hackett was the first NHL goalie I ever trained, and
I remember Jeff Hackett for sure.
And I remember him telling me about this new butterfly. And, I can still picture him getting towels from the physio department and folding them up and putting them under his knees. And, and just thinking oh, wow, that's what a cool idea. But also thinking okay, just your hips aren't actually designed to do that. It's very cool, but also not so cool. So then as I started Revolution Conditioning, I kind of had developed a bit of a reputation for training hockey players. And so I started an online business, which was Goalie Training Pro. And so it was to work with more hockey players all over the world. And probably 10 years ago or so, I just thought, every time I post something for goalies, they're really excited and they try it and they come back and they tell me how it felt. And that was at a time when, how this has changed. People were saying goalies don't need anything different. They already think they're special. We don't need to make them feel more special. They just need to do the training. And I disagreed. So I thought, what? Yeah, my sandbox for the rest of my career is going to be playing with the goalies and helping goalies because they are they're a little weird. I play on the ice myself now too, so I can honestly say it. But I love them. I love the weirdness. So that's why goalies.
That's fantastic. Take me back, if you will. Western Ontario, London, Ontario. We hold dearly to our hearts. Both educated there. Master of Science in Kinesiology under literally a legend, Dr. Peter Fowler. Rewind, if you would, some of the things, the takeaways. What was it like in a day? Was it a therapy base? Was it strength and conditioning fused with therapy? Did that lead you in the door meeting those athletes at the time?
Yes, it did. It set me up. So it was great. I didn't know Dr. Fowler before he became my thesis supervisor. And I was very intimidated, to say the least, to work with him. But but it was like, you're gonna work with that guy. And it's like,
Sure.
really? But he was a wonderful, wonderful mentor. He, the biggest thing I learned from him, he would be a guy that, yeah, he's a world-renowned surgeon, a legend, and he would say, "Wait a second, like I don't understand what you're saying. Talk to me like I'm a 4-year-old. Explain this to me." And so I learned that it's okay to not know, that it's smart people ask questions. So it was a great experience. My thesis was studying the use of aquatic therapy versus land-based therapy in the early stages following knee surgery. And it was a particular knee surgery called the high tibial osteotomy.
Okay.
So Dr. Fowler was a swimmer. He swam for Canada at the Commonwealth Games. And I had some different ideas. And a little bit how it is. You need to also do something that might get you funding. Sometimes we don't get to study like exactly what we want. It's like, well, what, like,
absolutely can relate.
Yeah. So I had a few ideas, and one included this pool that we had in the Fowler Kennedy Clinic, and it had, some implications for people who'd had this surgery, because of unicompartmental osteoarthritis in their knee. So he kind of, remember, he pointed, he's got fingers like my yaya had, just sausages, and he pointed with his finger, "I like this one." So it's like, that's what we're doing. So it was cool because I got to go into the operating room and see all these surgeries. It's actually the version of the surgery that Steve Eiserman had,
Wow.
that Dr. Fowler did, that got him that extra Stanley Cup.
Wow.
So yeah, it's pretty cool. So if an athlete has a unicompartmental sort of bone-on-bone osteoarthritis in their knee, they chisel sort of it's either you can do an opening or a closing wedge, but you basically chisel a wedge in the tibial plateau, and then crank the weight-bearing axis to the unaffected side. So, if I'm bow-legged, then this compartment is bone on bone. So I can chisel and open a wedge on the tibia and make the weight-bearing axis through the less affected compartment. And it buys you maybe 10 or 15 years before you need a total joint.
Wow.
So we got those people in the pool. So I got to go into the operating room and see that, and sort of sit in on some of their follow-up appointments, and then get them into the swimming pool to do some rehab, and also sort of run them through their land-based therapy for the two different groups. So I made a lot of connections there, and I got to know the therapists and everybody there, so that when I finished my master's, just coincidentally, the guy who had been the kinesiologist in the physiotherapy department was going to take a job as the head athletic therapist at the University of Waterloo. So I just went every day in the summer and just showed up and volunteered and sort of learned Rob's job and how to do it. And then when the job was posted, they interviewed a lot of candidates, but I was lucky that I got that job. So that set me on a real path that had a huge impact on my perspective on strength and conditioning.
And I believe in London now, I think it was several years ago, did not Eric Lindros donate a significant contribution to Kennedy Fowler? Am I right?
Yeah, he did. And he also donated a bunch to the London Health Sciences Center for concussion research as well, that I think is sort of tied in. That's the thing, like, Dr. Fowler is such an amazing human being. I'll tell you a very quick story that tells you who this man is. About 10 years ago, my dad died really suddenly at home. And so I was at my mom and dad's home in the evening, the day that my dad had passed away. And the phone rang at my parents' home, not my home. And my brother answered the phone. He's like, "It's for you." And it was Peter Fowler.
Wow.
To say how sorry he was. So that's the guy you're dealing with. So when he says, "Hey, we need to do this," or "This is a good idea," or, "I have this idea," or, people help.
That's fantastic. What a man. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't want to stray too far off our conversation because I want to talk about goaltending, everything goaltending. But going back to your master's, do you feel that this helped you as thesis-based masters? Did you feel like it helped you in your practice putting and kind of linking scientific principles to solutions? Do you feel that? I do. I did with my time at Western. I wanted to think more like a scientist. Did you feel the same way with your experience at Western?
Yeah, and that's the same. That's exactly why I wanted to do a master's. I wanted to learn more how it works and have that open playground to really research it. And it was before really like the internet. So we would have to photocopy articles and but you would read this article and there's a reference and it would lead you to that, and you learn to understand actual research and where it has its place.
Sure.
And then you get to be around people, smart people and in the room with really, really smart people. So yeah, it was a turning point. It was a great experience for me. I have a theory that they don't let you graduate until they brought you to tears at least once.
Oh man. You and I both.
Yeah.
All right, pivot here. We're going into what you call the sandbox. This is your area. So for a competitive elite hockey player, or from a standard of just someone that's listening to this for the first time and doesn't have a huge hockey background, which I assume most all will, but from a biomechanical standpoint, talk to us about differences and unique differences being a goaltender as compared to a forward or D.
Yeah. Think of the biomechanical differences between being a pitcher and being an outfielder. So the pitcher's shoulder is the goalie's hip. So a goalie needs so much hip internal rotation. You think of the butterfly, the wider that butterfly is, the more, and, goalies are smart, so they're not always wide open, and the really good ones, know where they want to angle that rebound, but still the more you have there, the bigger your toolbox. But then you add into this RVH idea. So then now it's like, I'll just kind of show you, because if people don't know the position, but it's on the post. So my skate can be on the post, or my toe bridge can be on the post. There's different ones, but I'm in extreme hip internal rotation, but then I'm also in adduction because I need to seal the post with my shoulder. So it's quite a close packed position. Plus your skate can be kind of fixed or butted up against the net. So then that's fixed. So now I can kind of lever with my whole body weight, putting my hip in a position that it's like, no. So
your acronym, sorry, RVH. What was that? What's when you say RVH? What is that acronym?
So it's a reverse vertical horizontal. So in the olden days, not the olden days, but you used to see goalies up against their post here, right? So V vertical, H horizontal, and so I'm against my post here. But there were some gaps, and really goalies just invented it, just started doing, I'm going to go here. So this is a reverse VH.
Wow. So I see. And I can see the massive demands on the hip there.
Well, yeah, it's like, so, the ankle, the knee, and the hip, but it's like, okay, so now our femur, the head of our femur is like a wrench, and it's just, torquing on that pelvis. And I think that I am of this belief that the pelvis does have some degrees of freedom, and that it can get out of alignment. I think just the movements, almost every goalie's pelvis is out of alignment. Now we add the RVH on it, and it's like, oh, brother.
Yeah.
So
it definitely is a unique position. Which brings me and kind of leads us into our next question. I'm guessing the answer based on you and I talking off air. Goalie specific training. Is there such a thing? Do you believe in it? And if so, why do you believe in it?
I do believe in it. I think sometimes in our profession, we get into semantics.
Sure.
we don't like words.
Sure.
So okay, would people feel better if we call it demand specific training? Because like it's like, okay, am I going to train a sprinter the same as a marathon runner?
Sure.
No, and nobody's going to argue that. Am I going to train a football lineman the same as a defenseman in hockey? Well, no, and nobody's going to argue that. So why can't there be a different way to train a goalie who really is playing a different sport?
Absolutely. In terms of that training, are there elements, and we'll get to it for in a later question, but are there elements that you would specifically avoid and or specifically add to a program for a goaltender versus a forward or a D?
I really think that there are very few bad exercises, just bad prescription.
Okay.
I think sometimes when people think goalie specific, they think, oh, this needs to look like what a goalie does. And so, on the Instagrams, you'll see like kids like, smashing into their butterfly off the ice. And it's like, well, that's wear and tear. And
Sure.
That's not really what we want to do. It's like with a baseball pitcher, we're not going to have him, throwing a heavy baseball or something to try to make his shoulders stronger. We want to do our best to sort of preserve and help that stay healthy. So those things kind of, I like to avoid them. Now, sometimes we do have to work on controlling into and out of that RVH. One of the things I do try to do is not just have it, because when you go in the RVH, you usually, a lot of times you'll be on your skates and then you'll slide into that position. Well, I don't want it to just be a default fall into that position. I'd like there to be some motor learning of, okay, well, even though I'm in this very awkward position, these muscles, are what I can use to help sort of get in and get out. So things like that I think are helpful, but just with the right dose. It's not a volume type of thing. It's a really specific motor learning thing.
I've talked with a couple coaches about training goaltenders, and I'd just be curious as to hearing your comments about this. Several coaches talked to me about not squatting bilaterally full depth squats because of this internal rotation component. Is that something you'd say, Anthony, it just depends on which goaltender, or is it something you say, hey, even if it doesn't bother he or she, they probably get enough of that on the ice as it is? What are your thoughts on something like that?
Yeah, I'm not a fan. Like I'm fine with going to thigh parallel if they have the hips for it.
Sure.
If they don't have the hips for it, then I don't think it's essential. So this is one thing that I really think I learned when I started playing on the ice. And I only started playing on the ice probably 5 years ago, really so I could experiment and be like, well, what does this feel like? What gets tired? What hurts? One thing we forget about as strength coaches is that top down is very different from bottom up. So when we teach a squat, single leg squat, split squat, barbell squat, we're going from the top down and back up. But what a goalie needs to do a lot of the time is a bottom up pattern. So, if I'm in my butterfly, and then I have to drive out of my bottom position. So, if I'm talking full thigh parallel squat, I'd rather invest my time teaching them a bottom up pattern and building strength in that pattern than getting them squatting. Like, to me, even with my skaters a little bit, like squatting is, okay, you're probably going to be tested in squatting. So let's make sure when you go to camp, you look good squatting, or college, you look good squatting. But I think there are better ways to develop strength than squatting.
Absolutely. Interesting. I think there could be many different applications methodology-wise into what you're talking about, that bottom-up approach. You get, just overcoming squats, putting the pegs on, something like just as simple as that in terms and measures. Interesting application and certainly, again, methods that could be used for goaltenders. We talked at the start here, and you were going over hips and how important hips are. Are there specific screens that you use or that you would recommend for your goaltenders? Obviously, there's got to be internal, external rotation. Do you measure that? If so, how do you measure that? How do you value and objectify position?
Yeah, that's a good one. And it's definitely harder now that I do so much more online. So I don't
Sure.
get my hands on guys as much as I used to, or girls as much as I used to. But and it's sort of a choose your adventure. But I'll look at a deep overhead squat.
Well,
What does their body want to do just naturally? And what do you feel when you do that? I'll look at that hurdle step from the FMS to
Yep.
see again, how well do you do that? What does your body want to do? Because like skaters, a lot of goalies think that their lumbar spine controls their hips a little bit. So they'll go into that, instead of just bringing that hip into flexion, there'll be like a lumbar flexion as well. And so just looking again, well, what does your body want to do? And do you want to internally rotate if you need a little more room? Do you want to externally rotate? What does that look like? Then I will look at hip rotation, and I'll look at just to see, are they biased towards internal or external rotation? So I'll lie them prone on a plinth with their knee bent to 90 degrees, and I'll just put my hand on the outside of their hip to feel when their greater trochanter is kind of centered. And then,
Sure.
okay, are you a little bit internally rotated, or are you a little bit externally rotated? And then I'll just objectively look at, okay, what's their total internal rotation? I'll look at, each leg. Okay, yeah, how much are we getting internal, external rotation? I'll look just like a standing postural assessment. Usually
Yep.
when I find something big, it's on a standing postural assessment. It's like, oh, what is that? But one thing with the goalies, we'll find sort of a thoracic spine rotation from the gloves, because this is externally rotated, this is internally rotated. So we'll often see that kind of position. And I think thoracic spine mobility is really important for a goalie to see what's going on, when the puck's behind the net. If I can't get around and I lose it and have to come this way, that makes me very vulnerable.
Sure.
Because as soon as the shooter sees your head snap around, they're going for it. So that's another one. Usually I'll do like a single knee balance.
Okay.
So instead of single leg balance, just, come down onto one knee, cushion the knee, and just go into like a little half kneeling position, arms crossed, and then, lift that foot up and see how they do with it. And it's usually not very well if they haven't sort of been training it. But again, you see, well, what do they want to do to compensate? And
specifically speaking, pelvis wise, you talk most goalies, you said this malposition pelvis. I would probably say most hockey players, right? Are there methods that you use? I know you've gotten involved at some capacity, and correct me if I'm wrong, PRI kind of concepts, getting rib cage down. What are your go-tos? And whether it's a method, a theory, is it PRI, DNS, and what are you trying to target? Is it rectus abdominis? Is it sagittal plane fibers of the glutes? What are you trying to do to quote unquote set the dinner table? And what I mean by set the dinner table is place the pelvis in a better position.
Yeah. The first thing I want them to be aware of is that it matters, that pelvic position matters. So just like your regular hockey players, a lot of them will have that anterior pelvic tilt. So teach them what neutral pelvis is and what it feels like. I like PRI for the pelvic asymmetries. And I'll usually give it to them, as part of their mobility training. I think it just, and they tell me it feels better. I don't think it fixes it. And if I, have a goalie that I'm working with in the gym, I can sort of tell if it's quite out. I can tell, and then say, hey, you should go get this checked. I'm a big believer in staying in my lane. Online, if I have a goalie who's like, yeah, can you give me some stretches for like my hamstring? My right hamstring's just really tight all of a sudden. It's like, okay, your right hamstring didn't just wake up and decide to be tight. So then, it's like, hey, could you go see a physiotherapist or someone to see, ask them to look at your pelvis. So really it's just awareness. And I'm not smart enough like you are to be like, I got to target these, it's like, what do I need to do? What muscles do I want to work on? And how can I help them learn those patterns with the minimum amount of wear and tear?
Sure. And I would imagine that during the demands of the season, obviously you're trying to fill buckets that you're not getting on the ice, right?
Yes, and it depends if they work out with their team or not. So a lot of team workouts, you kind of know, like, okay, your team workouts is gonna check off the big boxes. You're gonna
Sure.
get some kind of big compound leg and maybe a knee dominant and a hip dominant. You're gonna get some kind of big push, some kind of big pull, some kind of ab core something work. So I'm not gonna try and recheck those boxes, even
Sure.
if I like my way better.
Yeah.
I'm going to go into, what do you need as a goalie? So it might be that bottom up strength. It might be that quick knee recovery lateral push. So I go after number one, trying to keep you healthy. And then number two, trying to keep that explosive power. Stamina, they should be getting their stamina in practice. So they should be working hard in practice so that stamina box is checked. I think it's that speed and max strength and then keeping them healthy that I like to focus on in season. But like if someone's working out with their team, I might give them like 4 or 5 exercises to do, plus their mobility.
Sure.
And
Sure.
just keep it really short and sweet.
Makes plenty of sense. Okay. I want to pivot once again. Hips and hockey, we've talked about a little bit, but I want to get into this idea of these injuries that we've seen more and more and more and more. FAI, femoroacetabular impingement. Okay. Chicken before egg, egg before chicken. And is it even possible to tease this out? And what I mean, chicken before egg, egg before chicken, is this a structural issue that people are born with? Whether you've got a acetabulum or a femoral head that's out of whack, and there's bony deformation or bony abnormality, excuse me. Is this something that the position has just evolved? You talked about the butterfly and Hackett. Geez, I feel like you aged me. I talked about Hackett and the butterfly. So clearly, I would imagine, and this is where I'd love your history lesson in terms and measures of, it seemed to me back in the 80s and 90s, goalies were much more on their feet, right? And now you're seeing this ridiculous internal rotation, butterfly, et cetera. But, from all your research, where is this coming from? I know that's a big question.
I think it's both nurture and nature. So again, like a baseball pitcher, we're asking our joints to do something they aren't designed or intended to do.
Yep.
Some people have a freakish anatomy that really lets them do it. I'm biased towards internal rotation. I have, lots of abduction. Maybe the angle on the head of my femur is more like this than like that. And so it gives me more range of motion and I can get away relatively unscathed, even though I'm doing these things that really most hips aren't designed to do. To those of us who are sort of in the middle, sort of have like, okay, average hips, where depending on what we do and how much wear and tear we put on them, maybe we will develop some FAI. Is it going to be so much FAI that we can't continue playing? I can't remember. I think it was a Mark Philippon study, but they looked at NHL players, not specifically goalies, and I'm really bad with numbers, so don't quote me on this, but it was like on radiograph, like 80% of them had evidence of FAI, but only 30% had symptoms or something like that. So it's where's the tipping point. And then I think there are people that just, your hips are designed to be an anti-goalie. You really aren't designed, and you're going to probably get in trouble. And I think too, when maybe it's getting better, but it used to be when the butterfly was kind of new, and you'd go to any goalie camp, and the first like half hour was these kids like smashing into their butterfly, like the more noise you can make, the better. And when you think of kids that are growing really rapidly,
sure,
and their bones are developing rapidly, and then putting these impacts and these forces on it, it's like, oh, that's probably not the best.
Do you feel too the volume of games? Like I know that I can speak for our organization here in Columbus, Ohio. And I know a lot of times the goaltenders split, but it's almost like a mini National Hockey League schedule. I mean, if you look at our touch points, if you have the totality of practice, games, and then strength and conditioning touch points, you've got about 180 touch points a year. Like that's a lot of volume.
Yeah.
It's specifically for goaltenders on these patterns.
Yeah, and when you look at practice, how practices are designed,
Sure.
not many coaches are thinking like, what would be best for our goalies development today? It's like, hey, we got to work on whatever, our penalty kill or whatever. So goalies are getting a lot of volume. Again, I'm very poor at recalling numbers, but when you look at how many butterflies a goalie does in a game situation,
Hmm.
let's just say it's 35. And then you look at count a goalie's butterflies in even like warm up. It's like, okay, that goalie did like 75 butterflies in warm up, and they only need really, this many in a game. So there's definitely something like that. And then that leads you down the rabbit hole. Well, can we do a pitch count, like a butterfly count, like you do a pitch count in
Do they
minor
actively
baseball?
do they actively do that? Are you aware of that? Do they?
No, they don't. It's kind of a little pet project that I've sort of been thinking, and really with like accelerometers now are so cheap. So, it's kind of trying to figure out, just make a really simple program that it will count, and it's like, well, is that an RVH or is that a butterfly? Well, I don't really care. How many times do they like smash down? and,
Sure.
and just to look at it and kind of see, even just to spray a little light on it, like, hey, like this is what they do in a game, this is how much wear and tear they're getting in practices.
So I don't know if we can ever answer that chicken and egg question. I sit obviously on the fence. We don't know if it's a structural issue. It certainly seems as though the problems has been exacerbated, but it could also be because we're testing something like this more, right? Or people didn't know about it before.
I suspect it's going to be worse. This generation is going to be worse again with the RVH.
Wow. You talked about it. You said it depends earlier on working with an athlete in season. And I don't want you to give me your top three. I know it depends. Context is king here. But if we're dealing with that repetitive position, your mobility exercises or your resets, could you give us, for a young goaltender or an elite goaltender, what are some things that you might throw at them during the in-season? Is it going after muscles, obviously like the glutes? Are you going after the abs? Are you purposely trying to avoid internal rotation with those goaltenders? We're not trying to throw gasoline on a fire, but what might you add a la carte to their program that they're not getting?
I think one of the things that I still want to work on is building some strength at length. But like you said, not in an aggressive way,
Yep.
because they're already getting quite a bit of that. But I think it's still important for them to be reinforcing that control.
Okay.
So, for example, we might do just like in a half kneeling groin position. So half kneeling groin position, and we could do like our foot would be on a slide board or something smooth. We can do lengthening, we can do shortening. But in season, we can maybe put like a super band around my hips attached to the power rack so that I'm still getting that some tension at length, but not quite the same demand. So I still think that's important. Hip internal rotation. One of the things that goalies will talk about is when I'm in my butterfly and I push. So if I'm pushing from my right to my left, so I have my left pad, I'm trying to keep it flat, it will fold in behind me as I go. So I might have it flat, and then as I push, it kind of folds in, because like you don't really strengthen those muscles. It doesn't just sort of happen naturally in the course of your training. So I will do some specific exercises for that to help keep that pad flatter as we go across. So that would be another one that I would have no problem including in season. And then I think the next one, maybe so in goaltending, when they talk about sort of head and the hands lead the body. So wherever the puck goes, my head and my hands should go, and then my hips should follow. And I think that sometimes they don't learn how to use their torso to make that connection between their upper body and their hips. So I would work on drills like that as well to really, again, sort of reinforce patterns.
Curious, this is just my curiosity now, but I would imagine too, in this position, so unique, unlike being a forward or a defenseman, that you may be able to get some good video and then go over that video from a biomechanical standpoint with like just basic apps like not Shutterfly, what's the one I'm thinking? Dartfish.
Dart fit, yeah.
Does that actively happen in the National Hockey League that you're aware of, or college hockey? Are you going over that biomechanical analysis? Is that something that you believe in?
Yeah, definitely. Because, think of times you've seen yourself on video and it's like, that's not what it felt like I was doing. Like,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So, like, when I'm on the ice, I think I'm Carey Price, and then I see the video, and it's like, that is not Carey Price out there, So,
Absolutely.
yeah, it is really helpful, and even just little things. Like, I don't even know. I think to call it a biomechanical analysis makes it like more than what it is, but
Sure.
even like same thing you work on with your skaters, but it's like if I'm going this way, do I do one of those?
Yep.
Like, okay, let's not do that, so looking at those little inefficiencies, absolutely.
Are there any rules of thumb, like heuristics from a position standpoint of being a good goaltender, like glove blocker? Hey, this is a good rule of thumb where you're carrying it, or is it just there's just so much individuality? When I talk about biomechanical analysis, I know that might sound like overly impressive. That's not what I mean, but I mean from a general standpoint, are there rules of thumb in terms of position?
I think there are schools of thought, and
Ah,
that would be beyond my scope. I would leave that stuff to the goalie coach to say, but there are schools of thought in,
okay.
even like, should it be like this? Should it be like that? Should it be here? Should it be here?
Yeah,
So yeah, definitely schools of thought. I don't think there would be kind of rules of thumb.
got it. Very well put. Looking at the skill of being a goaltender, and you can use athletes that you've trained or in the National Hockey League that you haven't trained, whatever, but what are three you think qualities elite goaltenders are able to possess, whether it's mental, physical, but three qualities that you've seen throughout the years that you say, wow, that's an elite goaltender?
It's funny because I ask the same question almost anytime I get to be around an elite goalie coach. I
Huh?
ask what is most important. What separates really good goalies from the elite goalies? And I don't know that anyone's ever not said their compete level.
Okay.
So competing on every puck, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a firehead, but it means that they're going to compete on every puck. The thing I see in the goalies I work with is they're consistent. And that's in any athlete I've trained that's really done very well at a high level, is they're consistent, and they're consistent on the boring stuff and the exciting stuff. And I think they understand that sometimes the boring stuff is more important than the exciting stuff, the mobility
Sure.
work, and they're just consistent builders, really coachable, like pick stuff up pretty quick. Maybe the third one too would be, and again, it's like, it's my bias, right? The people
Yeah,
that
of
I
course.
have success helping, they understand that, hey, I need to train smarter here. Okay, I understand what you're saying. Why do we do this? How does this help? Well, it helps this and that. Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. It isn't just they don't just want a hammer, just make me
Uh,
tired.
so true. I can speak from experience myself, training our hockey players, a lot of our athletes, why? And it's about training smarter. Anyone can make someone sore.
Yeah.
Give me 5 hours to chop down a tree. I'll spend 4 sharpening the axe. But one of the things that you hit on that I thought was really interesting, consistency. To me, training elite athletes or young Tommy, I think the two qualities that athletes need to possess is consistency and intent. If you're able to possess those, chances are, regardless of what sport you're playing, you'll reach your potential, whether it's the National League or whether it's, AAA or AA hockey. The other thing I wanted to hit on, consistency, just a comment. I thought it was just so cool. I had a unique experience several years ago in 2016 and had the opportunity to hang around some Hall of Fame hockey coaches and just shoot the breeze with them in a really kind of relaxed atmosphere. And I asked one of the coaches, Hall of Fame coach, I said, who's the best player that you ever coached? And he immediately spurted out an answer. And of course, I wanted to know, why? What made him so great? And I'll never forget what he said to me because it stuck with me and it still sticks with me. I tell our young athletes this. He said he embraced the monotony of being a pro. He said, you know how many times, son, that he taped his stick before pregame? You know how many times he had his pregame meals the exact same way, went to the rink at the exact same time, trained, continuously coming back and continuously coming back and continuously coming back. I think that consistency element in terms of measures of being elite, that has to ring true. I mean, I think that's a massively important ingredient.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
You've also dealt with from NHL to young developing goaltenders. What are 3 mistakes that you think young goaltenders make? It might be skill-based mistakes. It might be what they're doing in training. But what do you see from an overall standpoint? Hey, these are some issues that we'd like to resolve.
I think one is that we all watch Hockey Night in Canada, and you hear the commentators talk about how hard this guy works. Oh, he works so hard, and he came to the rink 5 hours, and he's got a 3-hour warm up, and he worked so hard. And so they see that and they think, well, I want to work hard. I want to be the hardest worker on my team. And I think it's important to be able to work hard when it's time to work hard. But I don't like the idea that, my goal is to work hard, because most of them end up just working hard on the wrong thing. And it doesn't get them where they want to be. So that's one, is just like, I want to be the hardest worker, as if that's going to help me make me stop more pucks. I think they want to work on getting big and strong, when really they should be working on getting amazing at skill. So use your skill development window, not trying to get big and strong, because you don't have the hormones to get big and strong. You can get stronger and you can learn the skill of training. Sure. But let's use that motor development window to really become amazing skaters, and spending time working on the skating technique, and just, like being amazing. It's so funny, because parents will say, oh, the coach makes him do the skating with all the skaters. Okay, awesome, great. Have at her. Yeah. And I think the last thing, they don't bend their knees enough.
Wow, interesting.
They bend forward at their hips, but they don't bend their knees.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Wow. Okay, I haven't seen that. That one got me. Bend their knees enough. It's young goaltenders right now. How is the position, do you think, in the next 5-10 years? How do you think it's going to evolve? Is it going to, obviously we had stand-up goaltenders. Obviously we're at butterfly. We've got acrobats like Hasek. We've got, how is the position right now going to change in the next 5-10 years? Is it equipment? Is it going to be thicker, bigger pads? Is it going to be something that we're missing in terms of off-ice training? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think it'll be equipment, because I don't think the NHL will let it be equipment. They're trying to keep the silhouette as trim as they can. I think there might be a move away from the super tall goalie. A 6'8" goalie, even in their butterfly, they're, that much above the net, really, from what the puck sees. So that's the other thing, that it doesn't matter what I see looking at the net. It matters what the puck can see. So I think there might be a little move away from those super tall goalies.
Okay.
To more, but again, there is sort of that minimum height, I think, that you sort of need for the NHL, and that's very unpopular with people that aren't as tall. But I think we'll get sort of a middle height goal, like 6'2", 6'3", something like that, but who are really, really fast and really explosive, because what that lets you do is play with more patience. So one of the things that you want to do as a goalie is really wait for the shooter to make their move or to make their release, and then decide,
sure,
okay, is this something I can get from my skates, or do I need to go in my butterfly? And that's like incredibly hard to do. And when I play net, it's like, that's impossible. There's no way. There's no way you can, but these goalies, I think they can, so that they can play with that patience. They have the speed to play with the patience, so that they can really truly play more of that hybrid style that, sometimes it's stand up and sometimes it's butterfly. And you see that now, a few years ago, everyone used to butterfly, but, now it's goalies that play with more patience. And yeah, we'll see. I a couple of years ago, I used to think, I trained a couple of really good football players.
Okay.
And I trained an O-lineman who was like big boy, but he was so fast. Like, you'll appreciate this. Like, we would be doing like starts and 40s, because he was going to a combine, and Like it honestly would give me goosebumps and like bring me to the verge of tears to see him like sprinting. It was like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. But it's like if one of these kids grew up playing hockey, like they'd be a really good goalie. I don't know
Dangerous.
how the mass of their size might do a number on their hips before their time, but it's kind of interesting. Like it's like, yeah, it's kind of interesting to think about it.
Reactive, skill seems to be coming through. Have you experimented with it on your goaltenders or ocular, like vision training? Is that something that you feel training the eyes? Does that fit in programming for goaltenders? Is that something that you feel can be trained?
Yeah, I think it can. And again, it's a little bit for smarter people than me. I'm not really well read on that. But there are some programs that work on convergence and divergence. And I think also, if it just highlights like that there might be a problem.
Sure.
There's a guy, his name's Josh Tucker, and he works with goalies doing like eye-hand or hand-eye work, but he'll do some assessments, and he's shown video at conferences I've been at where, the goalie's just supposed to, with their eyes, follow a dot or something that's going in a circle. And so the goalie's eyes will go like this and then go like, cut down on an angle. And so it's like, whoa, that's kind of crazy. So then he would do retraining and show follow up that now, the goalie can make use of their full range of motion in their eyes. And so I think there is something to that. Another actually really interesting thing in the last sort of year and a half, there's a company called Sense Arena out of Prague in the Czech Republic that's made a virtual reality goaltending program.
Oh, wow.
And
interesting.
I'm not actually, they just made a skater one too, Anthony. You should check it out.
What's it called? I'm sorry.
Sense Arena. SENSE Arena.
Okay.
So I don't play video games. I never have. I'm not interested in the least in virtual reality. I like living in my own world. But one of my friends, a guy named Brian DeCord, he was involved in the sort of the advising these guys getting this started up. So I thought, I'll support what he's doing. Some of the goalies I work with probably think it's cool,
Yeah.
And like I put it on and I couldn't believe it. So you have some drills are sort of computer generated shooter, but still you can kind of read the release on the stick. But then also there are drills that use live shooters, and you're in an arena and it sounds like the arena. An arena has that quiet echo almost sound when you walk into it. It sounds exactly like that.
Wow.
And there's a net, and still, like, I've had it for over a year and I still go to like lean on my net and it's like, oh yeah, there's no net there.
Ha!
I use it on my synthetic ice. People use it on rinks. You can also just use it in your socks and shoes. But for me, that's, I can set a drill and I can just watch the puck. Sometimes I won't even try to save it. I'll just watch the puck go all the way into the net, because that's another big thing for goaltending, is really to follow the puck right into your glove, follow it into your blocker and off your blocker. And that's a skill that I don't have, so you can practice it like that. But it's crazy. Like you can pop the puck off your blocker, catch it with your glove. It's like words can't explain it. Like right now you're thinking like, oh, that sounds kind of cool, but you would try it and you would be like I can't even imagine. I couldn't even imagine it was like this.
Sense Arena.
Sense Arena, yeah. And so now they've done like one for skaters as well, puck handling and drills and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Wow. A couple more questions for you. You talked about earlier a question that I asked, 3 mistakes goalies make. You said, we're overworking, skill. This stuck with me. And the last one was knee bend and not enough knee bend. The skill piece, I'm just curious about this because personally I struggle with it. So yeah, I always say, and it might be a poor analogy because the physicalities of it, but I always say, if you want to be a good guitar player, you got to play the guitar. No one would say, listen, spend 8 weeks with me and I'm going to increase your index finger strength and then go play in front of a live concert. Now, I also realize that advice might be given differently to a young Tommy who's never, he has to have a base of something. My hypothesis working with our elite hockey players is that they need to spend more time on the ice and less time with me. And when I say on the ice, I don't mean condition skating. I don't mean mindless repetitions playing summer leagues. I mean targeted skill work, puck handling, edges, read and react. And in turn, stress is stress. So something's got to give. That might be a touch point from me in the gym. It might be only 3 days a week as opposed to 4 that young Tommy's doing. For me, I can speak from my experience as a former player. I think and this sounds bad because I'm a strength coach now, I think I overvalued the strength aspect of it later in my career where I needed to recalibrate and refocus on the ice portion of it. Does that ring true with goaltenders as well? Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I absolutely do. Like, and I think strong enough is strong enough.
Yes. Yes.
And I do see also that there's a difference between a skater who needs to battle and push someone off a puck and someone's going to try to push them off a puck. But for a goal, and not to say that I don't think goalies need to be strong. So I'm not saying that, but yeah, I think strong enough is strong enough. And if we're just like, well, yeah, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Sure. And I agree with you. I'd rather see them doing a lot more skill work. I think too, like puck handling goalie is going to be like a running quarterback. Remember, like, I don't know, 5 years ago or whatever, it's like, wow, and this guy can run too. And now it's like, there's no quarterback in the NFL that can't run the ball. Yeah. And, I think soon there's going to be no goalie in the NHL that isn't like, holy crap, look at that guy handle the puck, So yeah, all those skills. I agree with you. And I agree with you too, as goalies, as athletes get older. And it's hard because especially you get those ones that got to where they are because they worked hard and now they're, even 26, 27. It's like, we need to cut your volume a lot.
Big time. Big time.
Bit. Yeah.
Lastly, please educate us all. Goalie Training Pro. What's a day in the life for you? Who are you serving? All sorts in terms and measures of skill levels?
Yeah, it's cool because I think when I was younger, and I've never really been like starstruck, but I think it was like cool to like, this guy's in the NHL or,
Yep.
But as I get older, it's like, no, I really just like helping goalies get to their potential, like you said. And that's the thing too. I'm always harping on, hey, our job is just to make you the best goalie you can be, whatever that's going to be. So I don't work with any goalies under 14 just because it isn't really my aptitude. And I think that they need a different approach and that isn't my aptitude. But, adult goalies, new goalies, trying to go from AA to AAA, trying to go from, junior to college to pro. I love it. If it's a goalie who loves hockey and who loves the position and wants to see how good they can be and they're going to do the work to get there, then that's my jam.
That's fantastic. Our guest today has been Maria Mountain. Maria, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Anthony.